It's Adam here for PC Monitors, and in this video I'm going to be taking a look at the OSD on-screen display menu system of the AOC AG273QCG. The OSD is controlled by a joystick at the bottom of the monitor. During normal operation, this glows red unless you've got the light effects feature activated, in which case it'll glow whatever colour you've customised that to, and I'll come on to that shortly. So it glows red like this usually. The LEDs around it also light up. There are a couple of LEDs and they do different flashing patterns according to what you set the light effects to, which again I'll come on to shortly. If the monitor is in a low power state, so it loses signal to the computer, that will go amber regardless of what you've got the light effects setting set to. If you press the joystick in, you get into the main OSD menu system, which I'll come on to shortly. If you twiddle the joystick to the left, you can activate one of the game modes. There's three numbered ones: Gamer 1, Gamer 2, Gamer 3. These give you full flexibility in the OSD, and they allow you to have three different sets of settings which you can quickly recall, and they give you all of the same flexibility that you get with game mode set to off, but obviously they store the settings, so that can be useful if you like different sets of settings stored. There are also some other game mode presets which I find far less useful: FPS, RTS, racing. So there's just three more there, sorry, FPS, RTS and racing. And these lock off many features in the OSD. You can't go onto the luminance menu there, so the monitor is stuck on a high brightness, which is too high for most users. I certainly find it uncomfortably bright, so that's not particularly useful. I would just stick to the numbered ones, which give you the full flexibility. If you twiddle the joystick to the right, you can quickly activate the light effects feature or change this, and I'll go on to this very shortly in the main menu system instead of looking at this little menu, but you can quickly change how bright it is. So there's a low brightness, there's medium brightness, or strong, which is a strong brightness. And on the video, because of the compensation done by the camera, this may not appear obvious, the difference, but it certainly does change the brightness. You can change the light effects mode, so there's various different patterns, and I'll go through these in the main menu shortly. And the pattern, I don't know why it says pattern there, it's more kind of colour really, but again I'll go through this shortly in the main menu system. If you twiddle the joystick up, you can quickly select the port used by the monitor, so DisplayPort or HDMI. If you twiddle the joystick towards you, then you have this on-screen crosshair feature. So you can't customize that in any way, it's either on or off the on-screen crosshair, but it's quite easy to accidentally put this on the screen, and if you don't know what it is, you just have to press the joystick towards you or down and it'll disappear again. So if you press the joystick in, you get the main menu system, and if you hold the joystick in for a few seconds, that's how you turn the monitor off or put it onto a low power state, as if it's off. It's actually on standby. But it acts as the power button, in other words, if you hold it in. The main menu uses a new style, which is a nice refreshing change from AOC's usual style, which they've used since, I think it's 2011, the same sort of menu system. So some of the Aegon models have this newer style of OSD, which I find a bit more, well, it's more interesting because I'm quite sick of the old one, to be honest. Before I go on to this, the various settings, I'm not going to do them in order. I'll just show you the light effects system, because I have been going on about this a little bit. I'll just turn the lights off. I've turned the lights off in the room so you can see this feature in a more obvious way. But the monitor has, as I've shown you, a light effects feature here at the bottom of the monitor. You can see it's pulsating. I've got it set to simple shift at the moment. I'll set this to strong so it's a bit more obvious. There's actually, you can see, you might not be able to see on the video because the brightness is a bit messed up at the moment, but there is actually light coming from behind the monitor as well, so it sort of surrounds it, a bit like a bias light depending on the settings you use. So there's a ring of LEDs which go around the monitor, and they kind of mimic the pattern that the LEDs at the bottom are doing, kind of project a bit of light behind and around the monitor. They're not massively bright, but depending on the settings you use, they are reasonably bright, and I'll come on to that and show you how you could set them up so they're a bit brighter. So there's various different settings: static, simple shift. I'm not going to go through all of these because it would basically take about an hour. There's absolutely loads of them. Gradient shift. Let's show you that one. They're basically just different flashing patterns for the lights at the bottom and the rear of the monitor. Simple filling, one-way filling, two-way filling, breathing, let's say there's loads of them, motion point, zoom, discolor, water wave, flashing, and demo, which just cycles through them. Let's see, water wave, pattern. This is actually color, so you can have it set to red, and that's now set to red water wave, and the thing at the bottom is just doing that kind of flashing pattern. And this is quite a sort of devilish Darth Vader-esque red. It's probably going to appear a bit orangey on the video, but in reality it's a fairly vibrant red. So you can see that behind the monitor as well, doing its thing. See the ring there, and it actually probably looks a bit pinkish in the video, but it's quite a deep red, doing various different flashing patterns there. Or you can have it set to green. And I can see it behind the monitor. It is lighting up my wall, but for some reason it's not really coming out on the video, I don't think. I've just set it to a static pattern so I can show you the colours a bit more clearly. I'll just show you them at the bottom, but they're also projected behind the monitor, as you can probably see at this point. So there's green, there's red, as I've already shown you, green, blue, rainbow, and that, I think for that you need to have a certain light effects mode, which is animated selected. So I've got it set to simple shift. You can now set it to rainbow, so that cycles through loads of different colours. And you can see in particular the lights at the rear of the monitor. It's a bit of a disco going on. It's quite cool. Sort of a bit gimmicky, but it's a nice thing to show off to your mates or whatever. So yeah, you can see it more clearly there. If I go behind the monitor a bit. So that's a bit of fun there. Or you can have it set to user defined for the pattern, and this allows you to set the RGB values for these RGB LEDs, so you can completely customize them. If you have it set to, by default it's set to 50 on each of these, and that actually gives you, even if you've got the light effects set to strong, it doesn't give you a particularly high brightness. If you set them to 100, it's brighter. You can see I've got the blue set to 35, but as long as you have at least two of these set to 100, and you're happy with just a kind of cool white, I'm just going to put this on static again. That actually is quite bright. As long as you've got two of these set to 100, you can have blue set to something lower, and that'll give you a kind of warm look to the light. It probably looks a bit cooler than it actually is on the video. I mean, it's very difficult to gauge colour temperature from a video, but it's a kind of warm light, and you can see that it actually is visible. It's fairly bright. I mean, it's not particularly bright, but it's certainly bright enough to act as a bias light. And I use this in the evening or when it's dimmer in my room. I don't generally use the monitor when it's this dim, but this is just for showing off the feature. However, it is a bias light, so it enhances perceived contrast if you've got it set up like this. If you prefer, you can have it set to a cooler blue. So if you set these all to 100, it's a cooler look to it. And in the video, it probably looks really quite an icy blue, but I mean, it's sort of a bit of a lighter blue in practice, but it's definitely a cool blue, cool white, sorry. Or you can set these to, I mean, whatever you want. Let's see. You can have it if you want a nice purple colour, for example. That's nice, but I mean, you get the idea. I think I'll move on to other settings now because you're probably a bit sick of this now, but it's quite a nice little feature, especially if you use it as a bias lighting. It has a bit of utility. So the main menu then. First is game setting, and this has various quite useful settings that you can select. The game mode, which I've already gone through. Shadow control. So this allows you to fine-tune the gamma curve of the monitor such that darker shades in particular are lightened, and the reason you'd want to do this is to give you a competitive edge in a game so enemies are easy to spot in dark areas. So you can set that to 0, which is disabled, the default setting, 1, which brightens things up a bit, 2 or 3. So I'm sure you can see from the video that those squares become progressively lighter, and there's a particular bias for the darker shades, but it does lighten up the lighter shades as well, although it doesn't affect the black. But AOC shadow control setting, it's actually not usually implemented this well, because usually you'd put it up one level and the image would just look completely flooded, whereas on this one it's a more gradual effect. It does certainly lighten up the dark shades in particular, but it doesn't affect the black point, so you actually maintain strong contrast. On other AOC monitors I've used, it just floods the image, it completely destroys contrast and everything. So this is much better implemented if you want to use that feature. Game color, and this is a digital saturation control. So I'll just put on a slightly more colourful background. If you increase this, what you'll do is you'll pull shades closer to the edge of the colour gamut without actually expanding the colour gamut itself. So that does make things more saturated, but you also crush the shade range because you're not expanding the colour gamut. And you're just compressing everything together, but making things universally way more saturated. So this sunflower now looks extremely vibrant, but you've also lost the sort of range of red, orange and yellow tones. It just looks quite cartoonish and weird. But if you like that kind of effect, you know, you can maybe apply this a little bit. It's similar to NVIDIA Digital Vibrance. You can also decrease it lower than 100, and then that desaturates the image, so eventually it'll become completely monochrome. I prefer just setting this to 100 because it gives the best shade variety and the most natural look to the image. But as I said, some users have their own preferences, so this is quite flexible and it works if you want to use that. The dial point, the on-screen crosshair, I've already shown you that. So you can see that's in the middle there. If you want to use that, there aren't different designs, there's only that standard red one you can see there. Overdrive, explored in the review, off, strong, medium or weak, you can set that to. Frame counter, and although this is called a frame counter, it's actually a refresh rate display. This monitor has NVIDIA GSync. I'll just change the background so this is a bit clearer. So you can see it in the top right there, it says 165. This will actually indicate the refresh rate that the display is at. Because it's got NVIDIA GSync, if you're running your game between 30 and 165 frames a second, that will correspond to the frame rate, which is why they called it a frame counter. So it doesn't work if you don't have GSync enabled. It'll just show you the static refresh rate of the display. But if you've got GSync, you can have this frame counter activated. You can have it towards the top right, you can have it towards the bottom right, the bottom left, or the top left. You can change the position on the screen if you want. Next is GSync setting. Deep sleep, and these aren't actually all related just to GSync, there's just sort of generic settings actually, some of them, but deep sleep on or off. And what this does, if your system goes to sleep and you've got deep sleep enabled, it'll put the monitor in a lower power state, and it gives you not a massive energy saving because the monitor doesn't use very much energy on standby anyway, but this will give you a slight energy saving. But the caveat is, if you resume your computer from sleep, sometimes the monitor won't wake up if you've got deep sleep enabled. This is a known issue for other displays as well. So have that set to off if you're having issues with that. USB charge, off or on. This allows you to charge devices which are connected to the USB ports, and that does mean that the power consumption of the monitor goes up a bit. Obviously it would if you're actually charging something with the USB port, but even if you're not, it slightly increases the standby power consumption. I don't know exactly by how much, and this isn't something I spend my time measuring, but it's sort of a slight difference to the power saving. So if you don't use the feature, just have it set to off for a slight power saving. ULMB, you can see that's greyed out. That's because I'm running the monitor at 165 Hz with G-Sync. You can't use this feature at the same time as G-Sync, so I'm just going to put my display into a mode which will allow me to use ULMB, just so I can show you these settings. 120 Hz, that supports ULMB. I then need to disable G-Sync, or in fact go and manage 3D settings, and then you can change monitor technology to ULMB. Now you'll see an obvious flickering on the camera, should pick this up. Actually, my camera I'm using at the moment is actually masking this quite well, so you can't see it, which is quite good because it can get quite annoying in the video when you can see it. But anyway, this is explored in the review, so I'm not going to go through this too much. You can change the pulse width, and again that's explored in the review. The highest setting will give you the highest potential brightness. A lower setting will lower the brightness, but you'll also get potentially improved motion clarity, and this is again explored in the review, so I'm not going to waste my time going through this now. I'm just going to set the monitor back to static 165 Hz because I personally find that more comfortable. It's my preferred way of using the monitor. And just before I forget, I will enable G-Sync again, because I do like to use G-Sync. Overclock enable, that's set to on, and all that does is it unlocks the 165 Hz refresh rate. It's set to off by default, so this is something you set to on, and you can then select 165 Hz in Windows or the NVIDIA control panel. It's a feature which I haven't noticed any problem using, that the monitor reacts just fine 165 Hz, and from my experience with similar models, you should find that with modern NVIDIA GPUs, I've got an NVIDIA GTX 1080 Ti, I'd be very surprised if anyone is not able to get it running at 165 Hz without issues. I can't promise that'll be the case with all GPUs, especially older ones, or I mean, I'm not making any promises anyway, but in general, I think you should be able to enable this and not really worry about it. So just set and forget. You then have to select apply and reboot if you've changed the overclock status, and it'll just restart the monitor, and you'll be able to select this in Windows or the NVIDIA control panel. Color setup, various different options here. Low blue mode, the low blue light setting of the monitor. I like this. I find it quite useful to use in the evening, where you should reduce blue light output to aid a restful night's sleep, especially in the hours immediately leading up to bed, because it disrupts your sleep hormones having too much blue light, keeps your body alert when it shouldn't be. So reading is the strongest setting, office is a bit weaker, internet weaker again, multimedia weaker again. These are explored in the written review as well. And one thing I would mention though, these are applied universally, so ideally I would have Gamer 2 set with my low blue light settings, but otherwise as my test settings. I'd have Gamer 1 set with my test settings, and I'll be able to quickly enable or disable the low blue light setting. Unfortunately, it's applied universally, so you have to actually go into the menu and turn it on or off the long way, so to speak. Next there's Color Temp. That allows you to change the color temperature preset of the monitor. There's Warm, which is this factory default, Normal, which is a bit colder, Cool, which is cool as in cool tinted, blue tinted, sRGB, explored a bit in the written review, and the User Mode, which allows you to manually configure the red, green and blue color channels. Next is Audio. That allows you to control the volume of the integrated speakers or whatever is connected to the 3.5mm jack. And you can enable DTS sound, which just makes things sound a bit richer. I quite like the effect with DTS sound on. Not all users do. Some purists might tell you that it sounds better without it on. But to be honest, these speakers they're decent, but they're not really going to give audiophiles a massive smile on their face. I mean, as far as integrated monitor speakers go, they're all right, especially given the wattage. They're 2-watt speakers. They're not bad. They're certainly usable, and I use them sometimes. But you know, they're not amazing. Don't expect them to be amazing. Light effects, which I've gone through. Extra, you can select the input used by the monitor, reset everything to the factory default, or just quickly view the resolution, the vertical frequency and the mode. The vertical frequency doesn't change according to the refresh rate. if you're using GSync, so it doesn't change as your frame rate changes. It always just says whatever the static refresh rate you've selected in Windows is, or your game, or whatever it might be. But mode will show you if it's NVIDIA GSync. If you've got that enabled in the driver, it will show you ULMB if you're using that, or normal mode if you're not using either of those features. OSD setup, you can change the language the OSD is displayed in, the timeout period, so how long after the last button press before the OSD automatically disappears. And that's in seconds. You can set that between 10 and 120 seconds. You can change the horizontal and vertical position of the OSD on the screen. Transparency, you can change the transparency level. You can have it very transparent or completely opaque if you prefer. I don't mind the default 25, I'm not really too fussed either way. Break reminder, this will give you a nice cup of coffee. No, it won't. It'll give you a reminder after you've been using the monitor for an hour, and it'll say maybe you should take a break. You can just dismiss the message if you prefer. Again, it's not really a feature I find useful. I take breaks when I need them. I don't really need my monitor to tell me when to do that. So that's all there is to the OSD on-screen display menu system of the AOC AG273QCG. Be sure to check out the full review on pcmonitors.info. There's a link to that in the description of the video, alongside information about how you can support the work that we do.